So your client told you they are guilty and you're still defending them. That is the one question that us lawyers have to grapple with every other day. Sometimes you have to represent someone who has assaulted another, someone who has been involved in robbery, either with violence or not, and all these heinous crimes. And sometimes the public comes out in arms. Why is this lawyer representing so and so? That is something I want to look at today and just answer this question. Why do lawyers defend persons who are alleged to have committed heinous acts? A good starting point is the cab rank rule. There's something called the cab rank rule, originated from London, the United Kingdom. Think of it this way, simply explained. You see the way normally taxis or cabs are lined up waiting for customers to come and on board. The rule is that the driver of the first taxi should be able, or the first cab should be able to take up the client who walks up to him or her for a ride. They shouldn't start discriminating each passenger based on, let's say, what they look like, or maybe just they don't feel like taking on the work or something like the sort. That example of the cab rank rule requires that if you're a taxi driver, if a client walks to you, you take up the job and you take the client to where they want to go to. Similarly, in our legal profession, if a client comes to you regardless of the crime they have committed, they have a right to legal representation under the Constitution of Kenya 2010, regardless of the crime they have committed, be it murder, be it rape, be it assault, and all these heinous crimes. They have a right to legal representation, and you can't turn them away, provided it is within your expertise to render that particular service. The only exception for the cab rank rule is where it does not fall within your expertise. Let's say you're not a criminal lawyer and you've never attended court in your entire practice. Clearly, you cannot be compelled to represent this particular client in that particular instance. So that is a good exception of the cab rank rule. Another exception could be where the client is not able to afford the lawyer fee in this particular instance. So it is all enshrined under the Constitution of Kenya 2010. Everyone has a right to legal representation. We are not allowed as lawyers to discriminate on clients based on the types of crimes they have done. Provided it is within our professional expertise to render the service, we are obliged to take up instructions regardless of the crime. Another angle to it is this. It's not about what the client has told me privately that they are guilty. It's about what the prosecution can prove. I have to put the prosecution to task because the prosecution has to prove beyond reasonable doubt that my client is guilty of the particular offense that is being charged with. That is another way to look at it. Criminal cases must be proved beyond reasonable doubt. If you can't prove it beyond reasonable doubt, then an accused person will walk away. So in our courts of law, guilt is not just a feeling. It is a legal fact, it is a legal conclusion, and it must be proved by the prosecution counsel beyond reasonable doubt. There should be no doubt in the court's mind that this particular crime has been done by the accused person. If there are any lingering doubts, then the court will not be able to convict. And until the prosecution counsel proves this particular legal threshold, the job as legal counsel, or my job as legal counsel, is to defend relentlessly this particular client or this particular accused person and test the particular evidence that has been filed against the accused person or my client in this instance. It is my job to put the prosecution counsel to the test or to task for him or her to prove beyond reasonable doubt that my client has committed this particular crime. It is my job as the defense counsel to protect the integrity of the system, to test every piece of evidence, even where the facts are very ugly or uncomfortable. I still have to protect the integrity of the system. Everyone still has a right to representation. Even those people who you feel like, look, they don't deserve legal representation, they have a right under the Constitution of Kenya 2010 to be represented by legal counsel. So I have no choice but to represent this particular client. So legal rights are not just for the innocent person, for the state to prosecute a particular crime. Legal rights also accrue to persons who have been accused of various crimes, and they have a right to legal representation and they have a right to defend themselves before a court of law. You might still ask why. Why are you defending this criminal or this alleged criminal? Because one day it could be you in the shoes of this particular criminal or this alleged criminal. It could be you in their shoes. Maybe the system has turned on you. Maybe evidence has been planted against you and the public is up in arms against you, not knowing the full facts, not knowing the full story, not knowing that these charges have been pinned on you. When that day comes, you'll want a lawyer who stands on principle, not on popularity. You would want to, when you walk or go to a lawyer's office and ask for representation, you won't want that lawyer to judge you just because you've told them, look, I'm guilty of this crime, or the evidence has been planted against me to make it look like I've committed this crime. In as much as the case looks almost hopeless, or the evidence has been planted so immaculately that it will be a difficult task to argue against it in court, you want the lawyer to be comfortable enough to take up the instructions. So yes, in that day when the system turns against you, you'd want this lawyer who stands on business, this lawyer who stands on principle, and who is ready to defend you to the bitter end. So in our criminal courts, it's all about proof. It's all about what can the prosecution prove. If the prosecution cannot prove it, if the prosecution cannot prosecute their claim, if the prosecution cannot produce enough evidence to convince the court of law that the alleged accused person has committed this crime, if they cannot prove that this crime was committed by the accused person on the legal threshold, which requires proof beyond reasonable doubt, then that particular claim is going to fail. It's as simple as that. So next time when you see a lawyer defending these accused persons, it is their job, first of all. It is their business. It is the way that they make money. You might not like the way a lawyer or counsel is doing their work. You might not like that an accused person is being represented, but there are two things here. The lawyer is doing their work. They are legally mandated by law to defend this accused person. The accused person, on the other hand, has an equal right or legal rights that need to be defended, and they are typically best defended by a lawyer who is well-versed and experienced in this particular area. So don't judge too harshly. Don't the harshest critique. Let the laws, let the systems play out. There are systems in place to make sure that the prosecution is able to prosecute a particular claim well. There are systems in place to allow a defense counsel to be able to defend an accused person. And there is a neutral person who is the magistrate or the judge who is well experienced and is well versed with criminal matters and is impartial enough to render a decision that is impartial and will meet the judicial test of scrutiny. And of course, if someone is aggrieved by a decision, they still have a right to appeal against that decision. There's always a right to appeal. So don't judge too harshly. If a prosecution cannot prove their case beyond reasonable doubt, it will fail. Simple as that.